Mom, do you hear something?
It was a weekday afternoon when I returned home, bringing my feverish daughter, who was preparing for her university entrance exams. From the second floor of our house, where no one should have been, strange noises were coming from somewhere. Noticing something was wrong, my daughter and I carefully climbed the stairs, trying to avoid making any noise. That day, my husband had left early in the morning to attend a memorial service at his family's home, so he shouldn't have been here. Yet, the car he always used was parked in the driveway. I had a bad feeling. Finally, we arrived at the door of the room on the second floor where the noises were coming from. Our bedroom.
No. I can't.
Peeking inside the half-open door, my daughter, almost about to vomit, covered her mouth and staggered back. The small sound seemed to echo endlessly, refusing to stop. Inside the bedroom, on the bed, was my husband. And my mother-in-law, who was known for her beauty despite her age. Yes, what was happening in front of me was a scene of my husband committing adultery with his own mother. My husband had always been kind to both me and our daughter, and he was a thoughtful son, the ideal man. Those memories, like fragile glass, shattered loudly in my mind. My daughter, trying to hold back tears, was trying to get me to step back, but even in shock, I held up my smartphone. I managed to capture enough evidence without them noticing and left the room to put my sick daughter to bed. I'll go talk to them. Can you stay downstairs and wait in a warm place? My name is May, 45 years old. I live with my 4-year younger husband, Chasen, and our daughter, Rose, who is preparing for her university entrance exams. I work in an office, and we live harmoniously together. I met my husband through an introduction from my father. Our fathers were business associates and, because of their similar ages, my father introduced us. At the time, my husband was in his second year as a salesman, young, and I often felt shy being older. However, he treated me kindly, and eventually proposed. When I met his parents during the marriage proposal, they seemed elegant and very kind. My mother-in-law, Beth, looked very young, but when we got married, she was still only 37. I learned that she had remarried when my husband was in middle school, which made sense. Although there was no blood relation, my in-laws seemed to have a very close and understanding relationship. My husband spoke highly of his family when introducing them.
Since my dad remarried, I've finally understood what it means to have the whole family come together. I've been without a mother since I was little and felt lonely, but my mom always made sure to value our family, and that's why I am who I am. I want to build a family like that with May.
He accepted me into his family with that sentiment. Still, I began to feel that my relationship with my mother-in-law was unusually close. I had heard my husband was diligent with housework, but he often helped his mother in the kitchen, leaving me to the side. They would talk happily, discussing recipes while working together. Though my mother-in-law treated me kindly, there was something about the balance between them that felt off. Despite some discomfort, I decided to let it slide, as my mother-in-law was closer to my age. I must have been overthinking things. We got married with great support from both sides of the family, and life as a couple began smoothly. My husband was excellent at housework, and he learned all of it from his mother. I was able to enjoy my married life with peace of mind, and a year later, we were blessed with a child. My husband was thrilled, and even though he worked late most nights, he frequently checked in with me via email, making sure I was okay. Everything was progressing smoothly with both me and the baby. One day, my husband suggested I have a return to my parents' home birth for my first delivery to help ease my anxiety. He said,
"You're feeling uneasy about the birth and raising the baby. I think it would be great for you to have your family support you."
"You're right. I'm still nervous, and having help from my family would make me feel more secure. I think I'll go back home for the birth."
"Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll do anything to make you feel at ease."
He respected my decision, and he sent me off happily. As someone who was great at housework, my husband had no problem keeping the house spotless, and with my mother-in-law there, I had nothing to worry about while I focused on preparing for the birth. Then, our healthy daughter, Rose, was born. Due to frequent sudden business trips, my husband had difficulty taking paternity leave, but he made the most of his time and helped a lot with parenting. On his days off, he would spend time with Rose, reducing my burden, and my in-laws, who lived nearby, often came to visit and go out with us. After our daughter was born, my husband continued to rely on his mother, asking for her help or inviting her over frequently.
"My mom has never had kids, so I want her to have more chances to interact with the baby."
I had accepted that even without blood ties, a deep parent-child bond could be formed, and I thought my husband was a kind person who was thoughtful toward his mother. My mother-in-law was a full-time housewife, so she could eventually help take care of Rose once I went back to work. During the day, I used daycare and babysitters, so I wasn't leaving Rose all the time, but my mother-in-law would visit when she had free time. "Sorry for making you clean up after Rose. I should be doing better and not taking up your time like this."
"It's fine. I enjoy doing this. I've never had a chance to raise a baby, so I just want to help as much as I can. I've always wanted to spend time like this."
My mother-in-law would clean and prepare elaborate meals for us. I always felt sorry and apologized, but she would kindly reply like this. One day, hearing her words, I couldn't hold back my tears. I was anxious from daily child-rearing, and after being comforted many times, we managed to raise our daughter. Time flew by, and our daughter was now 17. She was preparing for a difficult university entrance exam and had daily tutoring and lessons. Around this time, we were informed that a memorial service for my husband's grandfather was taking place at his family's home. It was a small gathering, just close relatives, as it was for the anniversary of his grandfather's death. It was a weekday, so I had to work. Since our daughter's lessons would keep her late, I wanted to drive her and pick her up.
"I'll go alone and represent us. Someone needs to drive, and since the kitchen doesn't need help with the food, it'll be okay. Plus, it'd be rude to take time off from work."
All right. I'm sorry to the others, but can you handle it? Due to the small gathering, my daughter and I decided not to attend, and only my husband went. However, by mid-afternoon, I received a call from the school saying, "Your daughter has a fever and is not feeling well." Thinking it might be the flu, I left work early and rushed to pick up my daughter. Fortunately, she was just tired from the changing season and didn't have a cold. While buying jelly and soup for her, I returned home and noticed something strange. My husband's car, which should have been at the memorial service, was parked in the driveway. My daughter seemed to notice too.
Is Dad back?
She tilted her head. I tried not to let my unease show and said, "Maybe he forgot something." It seemed early enough that the service hadn't started yet. But when I opened the door, my heart skipped a beat. Alongside my husband's shoes were unfamiliar women's shoes, scattered on the floor. A sense of dread began to swell. I told my daughter to enter quietly. She looked puzzled but obeyed, walking in without making a sound. Although I felt bad for her, I decided to calm her down and put her to bed in the kids' room upstairs. But halfway up the stairs, we noticed something unusual.
Mom, do you hear something?
As my daughter said, there was a very faint sound, like a human voice. I walked ahead, trying to figure out where the noise was coming from. It seemed to be coming from our bedroom. I couldn't stop, despite the growing sense of unease. The bedroom door was ajar for some reason, and I could barely make out the dimly lit room inside. When I quietly peeked through the crack, I immediately recognized who was there. It was my husband, who shouldn't have been here, and my mother-in-law. The presence of both of them was unmistakable. In the bed. From the voices and sounds I could hear, it was clear, more obvious than anything, that they were in the midst of an affair. My daughter, who was next to me, quickly realized what was happening in the bedroom. With a look of utter disgust, she pressed her hand to her mouth and stepped backward.
No. Dad. I can't.
Her eyes were full of tears as she clung to me. It seemed she was trying to pull me away, but I couldn't move. To be honest, I felt like I was about to collapse at that moment. I'd seen the scene more clearly than my daughter had, and it felt like an impossible reality. My mind went blank. My husband, who had always been kind, seemed like a stranger now. But was that kindness always meant for her, my mother-in-law? Was he trying to maintain the perfect image of a husband and father so no one would suspect their relationship? Even my daughter had respected him as a father. The regret of her seeing such a horrible scene filled me. I whispered to my daughter, telling her, "Wait downstairs." Then, I urged her to leave the room quietly. "I need to talk to both of them. Can you rest downstairs in the guest room while I speak with them? I'll bring you some food and medicine." My daughter didn't want to leave me, but eventually, she nodded, her face full of worry. She descended the stairs. I didn't want to make a scene while she was in the house, but I couldn't ignore what was happening. In that moment, I told myself I had to leave proof behind. Even if I couldn't go into the bedroom, I had to capture this moment so they couldn't later deny it. I had already been deeply betrayed by both my husband and my mother-in-law. I didn't have time to waste wondering about their reasons. I immediately took out my smartphone and started recording with the video camera. I quietly filmed the two of them, oblivious to my presence, for a while. Perhaps it was because I had sent my daughter away, but I started to feel my thoughts clear up. The nausea I had been fighting off faded, and my emotions began to cool. It also became clear that I couldn't face my husband and mother-in-law alone. I needed to have a calm discussion, and I made up my mind to confront them. I stopped recording, attached the video to an email, and sent it to the relatives gathered for the memorial service at my in-laws' house. That evening, after the memorial service, the relatives arrived at our home, their faces pale and frantic. My husband and mother-in-law had fallen asleep after the affair, and they hadn't woken up until the relatives arrived a few hours later. I waited in the living room on the first floor, doing my best not to make any noise as I waited for them, my nerves fraying. Would my father-in-law, who worked as an executive at a large company, be of any help? When he arrived, his fury was beyond anything I had imagined. I had already informed him that my daughter was sick and resting, so he didn't shout, but if she hadn't been there, the situation could have escalated to involving the police. My husband and mother-in-law were dragged out of bed, pale-faced, and into the living room. My daughter was given some food and medicine, then moved to her room on the second floor to rest. My father-in-law stood in front of the two of them, holding the video I'd filmed, and interrogated them.
You've been deceiving both me and May. When did this affair even start?
He asked in a low voice. My husband, trembling, began to speak, and an astonishing truth came to light. According to him, his affair with my mother-in-law began around the time my daughter was born. It started when I went back to my parents' house for the birth. In truth, my husband had been in love with her since they first met when he was a child. At the time, my mother-in-law was just 27, and my husband was 14. The age difference was so vast that it felt more like a sibling relationship than a mother-son one. My mother-in-law, who treated him with kindness like a mother would, made him want to stay with her, and he began to help with cooking and cleaning more than a son usually would. She thought of him as a good son for getting along with his new mother, but for my husband, that was enough to satisfy his one-sided feelings. Despite not being blood-related, they had a parent-child bond. He knew they couldn't be together, so to move on, he started looking for a wife through matchmaking. That's how we met, through my in-laws' introduction. He married me, following their suggestion. I couldn't believe what I was hearing as I looked at my husband, who had always been kind to me.
But I couldn't forget her. Even when we were living as a couple, I kept wondering, why May? Why not Mom? And then, when May went back to her parents' house, I couldn't take it anymore and ended up sleeping with her.
Of course, my husband didn't force himself on my mother-in-law. She tearfully explained that at first, she was conflicted and didn't want to betray me. But as their secret meetings continued, her guilt faded. When they got remarried, having a second child was never on the table because of their ages. So, their relationship eventually fizzled out, but my husband could see that my mother-in-law was lonely. She had always been picky about appearances, and though she resisted at first, she began to fall deeper for her handsome stepson. We listened to her raw confession, trying desperately to suppress our disgust. This affair had continued for 17 years. My relatives and I were speechless. It was clear now that my husband had told me he would attend the memorial service but told everyone else that his whole family would be absent. My mother-in-law had suddenly claimed she was sick this morning and left for the hospital, but instead, she went straight to my husband's house and into the bedroom. None of us had known that we were being deceived for 17 years. The affair wasn't just hidden from us, but even from my daughter, and now the whole family was in an uproar. I can't believe you've been hiding this and deceiving everyone all this time.
What are you going to tell Rose? Think about the impact on her.
This isn't just your problem. Do you understand that? One by one, the relatives took turns condemning the two of them. But then, it seemed they finally gave up on trying to hide it and started defending each other.
We really love each other.
We're not blood related. We're not family, so it's not a problem.
It's Dad's fault for neglecting her all these years.
I quietly listened to their unbearable excuses. My father-in-law and I both demanded divorce from our partners. Neither my husband nor my mother-in-law objected, and everyone signed divorce papers on the spot. Later, my father-in-law and I hired lawyers and filed for damages for emotional distress related to the divorce. My ex-husband, considering the impact on our daughter, had already moved out and was living in a hotel. My mother-in-law, now kicked out of the house, joined him. They began living together, but my ex-husband, who had always known her as a homemaker, learned just how reckless she had been with money. Though my ex-husband had a top-paying sales job, it didn't last. I later learned through a friend that he had been sneaking away from work during the day to meet my mother-in-law. After the divorce, his company had transferred him to a lower position, and he spent his days doing menial tasks like making copies and cleaning. His stress soon took a toll, and he began losing his hair. The handsome dad everyone once knew was now a shadow of himself. His stress also made his face pale, and he lost the popularity he once had with women. To make matters worse, the affair with my mother-in-law, which only a few upper-level managers knew about, leaked out. Everyone in the office now knew about the divorce, and he ended up isolated at work. Despite my ex-husband's salary having decreased, his mother's spending habits remained unchanged. The stress of her reckless spending, which was on the verge of ruining them financially, made my ex-husband snap. He began shouting at his mother and forced her to get a part-time job. Though reluctantly, she started working part-time. Deep down, however, she still believed men should earn the money, and her condescending attitude towards others led to constant workplace conflicts. No matter where she was hired, she would quit soon after. They had once been secretly in love, but soon, arguments became a constant between them. However, there was nowhere for my mother-in-law to go, and my ex-husband seemed to realize that. So, even though their lives were completely devoid of love, he continued to pay the alimony to us while living a frugal and impoverished existence. I returned to my family's home with my daughter. Using the alimony and the money from selling our house, I was able to move to a place more convenient for my daughter's desired university. Thanks to her hard work, she was accepted into her first-choice university. For better or worse, the town where my daughter had grown up held too many memories with family and my in-laws. To erase the painful memories, we decided to start fresh by renting a small house. I kept in touch with my father-in-law. He had offered to use the alimony he had paid to my mother-in-law for my daughter's college tuition.
It's a way of atoning for what my ex-wife and son did.
He was one of the few blood relatives my daughter had, so I gratefully accepted his offer. Given that I was no longer working and had some moving costs, I was thankful for his support. Though not frequent, I kept in contact with him, and occasionally, we would meet for meals together. Now, I am watching my daughter work hard toward her dreams while I've just secured a new job. With my past experience in office work, my income is steadily improving. After everything that happened, my daughter no longer speaks of my ex-husband or his mother. But now that she's a blossoming college student, I want her to forget the past and enjoy her new life of learning. We are slowly finding fulfillment in both our personal and professional lives. How did you like this story? Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.
When I called to check on my daughter, who had gone missing, my granddaughter answered the phone, her voice trembling with urgency.
Daddy sank Mommy in the bath and went somewhere,
She said, followed by shocking words. Rushing to my daughter's house, I was met with a terrifying scene. To subject my daughter to this. That man, I'll never forgive him. I gritted my teeth, determined to send my son-in-law to the depths of hell. It's almost Amy's 5th birthday. I wonder what would be a good present. I messaged my daughter, but 3 days passed with no response. Gazing at the family photo displayed in the living room, I wiped my tears. I wish I could see them more often. I wonder if those kids are doing okay? My name is Sarah. Widowed and living alone while working part-time. I have a daughter named Nancy. She has always been kind and studious since she was little, a proud daughter who landed a job at a major corporation. Nancy got married 6 years ago to Jason. He is an elite worker at a leading advertising agency. He was cheerful and dependable, and I felt reassured in trusting my daughter to him. They soon had a granddaughter, Amy, and Nancy quit her job to become a full-time homemaker. The distance between my house and my daughter's family home is about a 3-hour drive using the highway. It's not a distance you can just casually pop over to. Nancy used to visit frequently when Amy was little, but the last time she came to our house was a year ago, right after Amy's 4th birthday. I remember having this conversation with Nancy at that time. Is Jason doing well? Is he helping out with childcare? I asked. Nancy replied,
He seems busy with work lately, so I've been handling childcare mostly. But he loves Amy and takes good care of her. He's even known as the ideal hands-on dad at work.
I could imagine how busy Jason must be with his job. Make sure you support him, I said, to which Nancy just laughed and replied,
I know, Mom.
According to Nancy, Jason's reputation as an involved father had even reached his bosses, and he was put in charge of a major advertising project targeting parents. Well, that's impressive. Say, Nancy, now that things have settled down with raising Amy, how about returning to work? You used to shine in your career, I suggested.
Yeah, maybe eventually.
Nancy replied vaguely. I felt a slight unease at my daughter's ambiguous response, but whether she worked or not was a matter for their household. I decided not to intervene further. It's been over 6 months since then, and Nancy hasn't visited. I've tried inviting her a few times, but she always declines. I felt I shouldn't push too hard and interfere too much. One day, while I was unusually out in town for a class reunion, something caught my attention on my way back home. As I headed towards the station, I spotted my son-in-law, Jason, walking along with a young woman, engaged in what seemed like an intimate conversation. However, since he was dressed in a suit, I assumed it was probably a business outing or something and didn't approach them. After some time had passed since that incident, I had some errands that took me near my daughter's family's neighborhood. Wanting to see their faces since I was already nearby, I messaged, Can I come over now? But there was no response. Thinking it was okay if there wasn't one, I decided to head straight to my daughter's house. When I rang the doorbell, my daughter answered with a surprised voice.
Mom, why are you here?
I sent a message, didn't you see it? I came by since I was nearby. Is everything okay? Then my daughter fell silent on the other side of the intercom, and instead, I heard Jason's voice.
I'm sorry, mother-in-law. It's a bit messy here, but I'll clean up right away.
Jason, sorry for dropping by unannounced. We'll be waiting, I replied. After standing there for about 10 minutes, the front door opened, and when I saw Nancy standing there, I couldn't help but be taken aback. She looked so frail compared to the last time I saw her, it was like a lie. Nancy, you look much thinner. What's going on? I asked.
Just on a bit of a diet,
she replied. Then, my granddaughter Amy came running up, saying,
Grandma.
Jason warmly greeted me, so I exchanged pleasantries and went into the living room. While watching Amy play with her toys, the 3 adults engaged in small talk. Jason was as charming as ever, showing genuine concern for me, appearing flawless. At one point, Nancy got up to refill the tea. I followed her and asked, Nancy, you look pale. Are you eating properly? Are you feeling unwell?
No, I'm fine. I'm healthy,
she replied. Despite her words, I noticed something concerning her wrist as her sleeve slipped. I grabbed her arm and lifted her sleeve, revealing a painful-looking bruise. Nancy. What happened? Jason, who had somehow appeared at the entrance to the kitchen, interjected.
It's just a bruise from a fall. Nancy can be a bit clumsy sometimes.
You fell. Is that true, Nancy? I asked.
Yes, it's true. She stepped on one of Amy's toys and fell inside the house.
Nancy nodded in agreement with Jason's assertive tone, and then she distanced herself from me. The kitchen conversation ended there, but I began to observe Nancy and my granddaughter closely after that. Amy remained her usual cheerful and innocent self, but Nancy seemed somewhat withdrawn, appearing a bit tense.
Sarah, we have plans to go out as a family soon.
Jason said, prompting me to reply. Yes, it's about time for me to leave. On the way home, I sent Nancy a message, saying, if anything is wrong, don't hesitate to talk to me. Her reply was,
There's nothing wrong. I'm happy, so don't worry.
Despite feeling an unsettling sense of unease, I returned home. 2 months have passed since I visited my daughter's family. I sent Nancy numerous messages, but received no reply, and she stopped answering my calls. She always responded to messages before. It's strange that the calls aren't going through. Are Nancy and Amy both okay? I want to see them and make sure. With these thoughts in mind, I decided to visit on a night when they were likely to be home. Sending Nancy a message saying, I'm coming over now. I got into my car around 6 p.m. During a stop at a service area, I decided to call Nancy again. However, when the phone was answered, it was my granddaughter, Amy, on the other end.
Grandma? Mommy's turned a strange color and won't move.
Those words sent a shiver down my spine, but I tried to remain as calm as possible as I asked my granddaughter. What are you saying, Amy? Is Daddy there?
Daddy sank Mommy in the bath and went somewhere. What should we do, Grandma? Mommy isn't responding.
Hearing the urgency in her voice, I realized this was no ordinary situation and hurried to my granddaughter's side. An hour later, upon arriving at my daughter's house, I was speechless. Upon opening the front door, I was met with a horrifying scene. The house was in disarray, with items strewn about, vases and dishes shattered and left abandoned. It looked as though a burglar had broken in or someone had gone on a rampage.
Grandma, this way, quickly.
Startled by my granddaughter's call, I hurriedly followed her lead to the bathroom. There, my daughter, fully clothed, lay submerged in the bathtub, face up. Nancy, stay with me. I frantically reached into the icy water, despite it being midwinter. Managing to lift her, my daughter's face was beyond pale, her lips tinged purple. Just as her face barely emerged from the water, there was a faint sign of breathing. Despite numerous attempts to rouse her, she remained unresponsive, prompting me to immediately dial 911. Before the ambulance arrived, my granddaughter rushed over to me, saying,
Mom said there's something important in her bag.
She pointed to a navy bag hanging on the living room wall. Upon a quick check, I found her insurance card in the wallet. Grabbing the bag, I boarded the ambulance upon its arrival. After arriving at the hospital, Nancy's treatment began immediately, while my granddaughter and I sat on chairs in the hallway. Amy, is it true that Dad submerged Mom in the bathtub? Amy nodded with a pale face.
Dad sometimes hits Mom and takes her to the bath. Amy is told to stay in the living room, but it's always scary. I feel sorry for Mom.
My granddaughter explained. Amy. I instinctively hugged her, and she began to sob uncontrollably.
Dad said, if you tell anyone, you'll never see Mom again. Amy, because I told Grandma, will I never see Mom again? I don't want that.
I continued to comfort my granddaughter, rubbing her back and reassuring her. It's okay, it's okay. Then, the nurse informed me that Nancy had regained consciousness. Nancy, still groggy, weakly turned her gaze towards me.
Mom, Please look at my navy bag. There.
With just those words, she drifted back to sleep. I carefully examined Nancy's bag once again, and to my horror, I found something unimaginable. Trembling, I confirmed what I found, gritting my teeth. To put my daughter through this. That man, I will never forgive him. At that moment, I resolved to send my son-in-law Jason straight to hell. Despite multiple attempts to call Jason, I couldn't reach him. So, I entrusted a trustworthy acquaintance nearby with something. 3 days after my daughter was taken to the hospital, I received a call from my son-in-law on my mobile phone.
I heard from a neighbor that Nancy was taken away in an ambulance. The woman with glasses who was with her. That's Sarah, right? Are you at the hospital now? Please tell me where you are.
I didn't disclose the hospital's location but instead instructed Jason to come to a cafe near the station. After leaving Amy with an acquaintance, I waited at the meeting place, where Jason arrived, breathing heavily.
Sarah, I'm sorry. I was away on a business trip, so I'm not sure what's going on. What happened to Nancy? Which hospital is she in? Please tell me quickly.
Jason spoke with genuine concern, but I wasn't fooled by his appearance anymore. I heard everything from Amy. You did something terrible to Nancy, submerged her in the bath, and left her, didn't you? How could you do such a thing? Jason murmured. Then awkwardly chuckled.
I can't believe it, Sarah. Did Amy really say that? Surely you're not taking a child's words at face value?
Are you suggesting Amy is lying? Jason explained.
Since she started kindergarten, she occasionally says things like that. It's like she has a vivid imagination or a habit of lying. We've been dealing with it too.
So, without saying a word, I played back the voice recorder I had taken out of my bag. What emanated from it was Jason's yelling.
Divorce. That insolent wife of mine. I have to teach you a lesson. I'll discipline you in the bath like usual.
His words were unbearable, filled with countless vulgarities. Afterwards, there were sounds of splashing water and Amy crying out recorded on it. As Jason paled, I stared straight at him and stopped the voice recorder.
What is this?
Jason stammered. Nancy was recording what happened that day. Perhaps she anticipated this, although she probably didn't expect to be taken to the hospital. I remarked.
She did that. How insolent.
Finally showing your true colors. I retorted. Jason wore a frustrated expression, but then quickly adopted a soothing tone.
Sarah, this is just a matter between spouses. It was just a heated argument at that time. No need to blow it out of proportion, right? It's also not good for Amy, you know?
The evidence doesn't stop here. There's more. With those words, I slammed down on the table the decisive photos of Jason's infidelity. They depicted him cozying up to a young woman, entering hotels together, and engaging in intimate moments. The woman was someone I had seen in the streets a few months ago.
This too, Nancy did this.
Jason hastily gathered the photos, and I calmly explained to him. Nancy had hired a private investigator to look into you. Is she someone from your company? And Nancy kept a diary too.
What?
In Nancy's diary that I read, it was written that Jason had been controlling, forbidding her from working since the beginning of their marriage. Furthermore, Nancy noted that Jason's behavior became strange around the time he became a project leader 1 year ago, and when she confronted him about it, she was physically assaulted for the first time. After that, she mentioned being subjected to severe treatment under the guise of discipline on a daily basis, and was warned that if she didn't comply, Amy would be harmed. Contact with me was also prohibited, and it seems her phone was checked daily. However, Nancy pretended to obey Jason while diligently collecting evidence for the divorce.
Now that I have gathered enough evidence, I will bring up the divorce today,
were the last words in my daughter's diary. You lost your temper when your wife asked for a divorce and did something terrible. Then you left her in the cold bath and went to see your mistress. Is that right? When I sternly confronted him, Jason remained calm and brazen.
I'm the elite among elites. People often say I'm the ideal dad. I provide for Nancy and Amy, and we have a happy family. Are you trying to ruin that over something trivial?
At that moment, I finally reached my limit. Nancy wasn't happy. And neither was Amy, who witnessed her mother being mistreated. I will not forgive you. You will pay for this. Jason then angrily shouted with a flushed face.
What can this old hag do to me?
I've already done what I could. I calmly replied, explaining to the bewildered Jason that I had sent the audio data from that night and evidence photos of his infidelity at work to his workplace.
What did you just say?
At that moment, Jason's phone rang, leaving him dumbfounded. As he answered the call in a panic, his face turned paler with each passing moment.
Hey, it was from my boss. They're removing me from the project. You really did it, didn't you? How dare you?
With his facade crumbling, Jason yelled at me with a contorted, ugly face. I remained composed and retrieved something from Nancy's bag. This is Nancy's decision. Please sign here. It was a divorce paper already signed by Nancy.
Don't mess with me. I'll never let them go.
Jason started tearing up the divorce paper with a flushed face, and I sighed. Then let's go to court. I'll make sure you'll be separated from my daughter. But before that, you'll have to pay for your sins.
What?
Right after you appeared at this cafe, I asked a friend to report it. The police will be here soon, so behave yourself. Jason turned pale and started trembling.
You're going to involve the police. Do you realize what that will do to my career?
I don't care. I'll never forgive you for what you've done. Never show yourself in front of me, Nancy, or Amy again. The police arrived, and Jason was taken away while shouting. Later, the divorce between the two was finalized. Jason was arrested for his cruel treatment towards Nancy. Along with my accusations, he was ultimately dismissed from his job due to being convicted. His mistress faced rumors at work and resigned. Although Jason's trial is ongoing, he has been cut off from his family and received no help from anyone. Nancy, now recovered, returned home with my granddaughter. Amy has regained her smile lately, and Nancy has found a job and is living a fulfilling life. We look forward to our granddaughter's growth and aim to support each other as a family from now on.